Animal invasions turn deadly. Number 8. The Four Pests Campaign. To kick things off, let's talk about the Four Pests Campaign, a time when Chairman Mao decided China needed to go to war, but not against another country. No, that would be too predictable. Instead, Mao declared war on mosquitoes, flies, rats, and sparrows. Yes, sparrows. It was the late 1950s, and Mao's great leap forward was, let's just say, tripping over its own feet. So, what was the solution? Obviously, it was to mobilize an entire nation against small animals, because nothing fixes economic woes quite like a nationwide vendetta against pests. We need a new enemy. The West? No, too ambitious. Pests? Perfect, let's take them down. To eliminate these pests, Mao mobilized the whole nation. Even 5-year-old kids were enlisted to help. Poison, traps, and cats were used against rats. Insecticides and improved waste disposal were deployed against flies. More insecticides and the elimination of stagnant water were the weapons of choice against mosquitoes. And for sparrows, children climbed trees and destroyed their nests to stop them from breeding, then banged gongs to stop them from sleeping. People also shot them from the skies with guns. Killing mosquitoes? Okay, they carry malaria. If mosquitoes are wiped out, no one will cry. 24 million pounds of dead mosquitoes were piled up. Flies? They play an ecological role, but they're dirty and transmit disease. And nobody likes them, so yeah, go for it. They got 220 million pounds of those. Rats? It's not fun to share your home with rats, and they also spread disease, so sure, why not? They killed about 1.5 billion rats. But sparrows? It turns out they were blamed for eating grain, so they had to go too. Chairman Mao, sparrows might not be the enemy here. They eat grain. They are grain thieves. They also eat insects. Silence. No sparrow shall be spared. And so sparrows were added to the hit list. The nation went all in. Children climbed trees to destroy nests. People banged gongs to scare sparrows to exhaustion. And guns were fired skyward like it was sparrow apocalypse. By the end of the campaign, 1 billion sparrows were wiped out. But then came the plot twist. The sparrows got their revenge from beyond the grave. Without sparrows to keep them in check, insects, especially locusts, thrived. And locusts are the crop-destroying supervillains of the insect world. With the locusts and other pests running riot, crops were decimated, leading to the Great Chinese Famine. Remember us. Yeah, you're bad. The numbers are staggering. Most estimates put the famine's death toll between 20 and 30 million people, making it one of the deadliest human tragedies in history. The mosquitoes, flies, rats, and sparrows? They weren't invading at all. They were just doing their usual pesty thing. But Mao needed a scapegoat and found 4 tiny ones. Unfortunately, the sparrow's absence left nature's balance utterly wrecked, and the consequences were catastrophic. So, what did we learn? Maybe don't declare war on birds? Exactly. Well, it's an irony because Mao could have learned this from the Aussies next on the list. Number 7. The Emu War. This next story might not have been as deadly as the Four Pests campaign, but it was definitely real. Well, kind of, and it's absolutely dramatic. Picture this. The year is 1932. In Western Australia, life's already rough for soldier farmers trying to make a living after the First World War. The government, in its infinite wisdom, decided these veterans should farm wheat during the Great Depression. But then, disaster struck. Enter the emus. 20,000 of these flightless freeloaders migrated into the area, taking one look at the farmers' fields and deciding, yep, this is the life. The wheat fields were perfect, and the conveniently installed drinking water for livestock? Chef's kiss. The emus settled in like they'd booked an all-inclusive resort. Gentlemen, the buffet is open. Wheat for days and water on tap. Let's feast. Unfortunately for the farmers, the emus weren't exactly polite guests. They trashed the crops and obliterated fences, inviting other pests to join the party. It didn't take long before the farmers were out of crops and out of patience. Desperate, they called on the Australian government for help, and because this was the 1930s, the government responded with maximum overkill. They sent the army, with machine guns. What followed was one of the more bizarre military campaigns in history. On the first day, the army opened fire on a group of about 50 emus. The initial barrage missed every single one. Dodge! Weave! They can't hit a thing! Did they just taunt us? Eventually, a second round of gunfire took out a handful of birds. Victory? Sort of. 2 days later, things escalated. Around 1,000 emus were ambushed at close range. It should have been a slaughter, except the machine gun jammed. The emus took advantage of the chaos and fled, leaving only 12 casualties behind. "Retreat and regroup, lads! They'll never take us alive!" As the battle raged on, the emus adapted. They appeared to post sentries to warn the flock of incoming attacks. Meanwhile, the soldiers were struggling with the rough terrain, their heavy weapons, and the soul-crushing realization that they were losing to a bunch of birds. Are they strategizing? I don't want to talk about it. By the end of 6 days, the emus had suffered anywhere from 50 to 500 casualties. The Australian military, 0 casualties, but they had burned through 2,500 rounds of ammunition. Morale was in the toilet. The army withdrew, utterly defeated. But the story doesn't end there. Someone back in Canberra thought, No, we can't let the birds win. So the army was sent back for round 2. This time, they managed to take out around 2,500 emus, but the operation still failed to protect the crops. The emus were just too many, too fast, and too clever. They'll never break our spirits or our fences. Eventually, the government gave up. The army withdrew for good, tails tucked between their legs, and the farmers were left to figure out other ways to protect their wheat. To this day, no formal peace treaty has ever been signed. The emus still roam freely, undefeated, and unbothered. Number 6. Everglades pythons. Among the Everglades' many uninvited guests, one particularly sneaky squatter has slithered its way to the top of the food chain, the Burmese python. Now, as its name suggests, this snake isn't from Florida. It hails from Myanmar, formerly Burma, and other parts of Southeast Asia. So what's it doing in the Sunshine State? Well, rewind to the 1970s and 80s when having an exotic pet was all the rage. Burmese pythons were especially popular because, as babies, they're only about 2 feet long and kind of cute. Perfect for beginners. Just like a goldfish, except, longer and hungrier. The problem, these babies didn't stay cute for long. They grew and grew and grew. Some can hit 16 feet or more. Suddenly, your manageable pet is big enough to eat the neighbor's dog, and that's a PR disaster. So what did these oh-so-responsible pet owners do? Release them into the wild, of course, because when life gives you a giant snake, the obvious solution is to gift it to nature. Bye, Monty. You'll be happier out there, with all the rats and deer. Paradise, baby. And paradise it was. The Everglades provided the perfect tropical environment, complete with endless snacks. Pythons quickly started chowing down on anything that moved, from rats to deer and everything in between. Now, around 2,000 Burmese pythons call the Everglades home. They've caused a catastrophic decline in local wildlife populations, and they're even challenging the alligators for the title of top predator. The rivalry reached a bizarre peak in 2022, when a python and an alligator squared off. At first, it seemed like the python was winning. Tap out, buddy. I'm calling the shots now. I can't tap out. You've got all my arms. But the python got greedy. It decided to swallow the alligator whole. Unfortunately, the phrase, "your eyes are bigger than your stomach," exists for a reason. The alligator proved too much to handle, and the python exploded. Worth it. Karma's a swamp, dude. This epic battle of swamp titans didn't result in any human casualties, at least not yet. But with pythons on the loose and growing, you might want to keep your pets indoors and your snacks well hidden. Number 5. Hungry toads in Australia. Cane toads are native to South and Central America, where they've always been minding their own business, gobbling up beetle larvae in sugarcane fields. They even helped out in Puerto Rico, where they earned a reputation as beetle-busting heroes. But then, in the 1930s, someone in Australia had an idea that could generously be described as half-baked. You know what? Let's get some of those big cane toads over from South America. Bet they'll sort out our cane beetles, no worries. Spoiler alert, big worries. Because here's the thing. No one stopped to ask a pretty basic question. Hey, do cane toads actually eat cane beetles? Turns out the answer was a resounding nope. You want me to eat what? That crunchy thing? Pass. Got any moths or crickets? And as it turns out, cane toads were very picky about cane beetles, but everything else, fair game. These toads started gobbling up insects left and right, basically turning the Australian ecosystem into their personal buffet. Delicious native bugs. Oh, cane beetle? Nah, I'll just save room for seconds on dragonflies. So while the cane beetles kept partying in the sugarcane fields, the toads took over. The 62,000 toads that were initially introduced multiplied like they were competing in an Olympic event for bad decisions. Today, there are over 200 million of them hopping around Australia, wreaking havoc wherever they go. The worst part, cane toads are poisonous, so when local predators like snakes, dingoes, and even crocodiles thought, hey, free snack, it usually turned out to be their last snack. Finally, a bite-sized treat. Wait, why does my mouth feel funny? Oh no. Efforts are now underway to reduce the cane toad population. Scientists are even trying to teach predators to avoid the toads by feeding them small, non-lethal doses of toad. It's basically the wildlife version of, try this kale smoothie. Trust me, you'll hate it. But despite these efforts, Australia's local wildlife is still paying the price for one seriously bad import. And guess what? The cane beetles? They're still there. Thanks for the free real estate, mate. I'll just help myself to the buffet now. Wait, what about the cane beetles? Who? Number 4. The 1915 Ottoman Syria Locust Plague. We've seen what locusts can do when humans upset the delicate balance of nature. But here's the kicker. They don't actually need our help to wreak havoc. These critters have been responsible for famines since biblical times. And trust me, they've kept that same chaotic energy alive, with the Ottoman Syria Locust Plague of 1915 ranking among the worst in recent history. But before we dive into the apocalypse, let's get to know our winged troublemakers. What exactly is a locust? Glad you asked. Locusts are essentially grasshoppers with a flair for the dramatic. Normally, they're just minding their own businesses, hopping solo, living that peaceful grasshopper life. But under the right conditions, like a big meetup, boom, instant swarm mode. Hey Steve, what's with the crowd? Oh, just a little gathering of millions. When they start hanging out, their bodies undergo some extreme makeovers. They change color, eat like they're at an all-you-can-eat buffet, and suddenly get way too frisky. And before you know it, the population skyrockets. Hey, is it me or is everyone weirdly into fitness these days? Look at all these wings flapping. Yeah, we're bulking up for the apocalypse, man. Once they've gone full party mode, they take to the skies in massive swarms, all in the name of food. Your food. The 1915 plague, a sky full of locusts. That's what happened from March to October of 1915 across Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, when grasshoppers transformed themselves into a locust swarm. When locusts were first sighted in Jerusalem, they blackened the sky. They were described as swarming in such density that they eclipsed the sun. Honey, do you see that? It's moving.
That's not the clouds, dear. That's dinner flying away, permanently.
Locusts didn't just nibble, they decimated. They devoured crops with the enthusiasm of a toddler at a birthday cake, leaving the land stripped bare. Between 60 and 100% of the region's crops were destroyed. Global food prices spiked. Locally, famine struck hard, especially in Mount Lebanon. Combine that with World War I and you've got a recipe for disaster. By the end of the famine in 1918, up to 500,000 people had died. But how many locusts were there exactly? We'll never know. Swarms can contain billions or even trillions of locusts. Dude, I think we might be overdoing it. Nah, they've got plenty left. Oh wait, nope, that was the last cabbage. My bad. For humans, it was a catastrophic invasion. And for once, it wasn't even our fault. Just nature flexing its destructive muscles, reminding us who's boss. Number 3. Murderous chimps. In 1994, Western Uganda experienced a chilling encounter when a chimpanzee wandered into a village and abducted a child. Tragically, the chimp killed and partially ate the child, an event that sent shockwaves through the community. The villagers tracked the chimp and shot it, hoping this grim chapter was closed for good. For a while, it seemed to work. No chimps ventured back into the village, and people started to breathe a little easier. Hey, maybe they got the memo. Yeah, sure, let's put up a no chimps allowed sign just in case. But peace was short-lived. 2 years later, the attacks resumed. Chimps returned with a vengeance, and more children were taken. Since then, an uneasy and violent standoff has unfolded between humans and their primate neighbors. Some villagers, driven by fear, resort to desperate measures like poisoning or trapping chimps, despite the risk of prison time. Others try to play peacekeeper, hoping for a day when humans and chimps can coexist. We just need to find common ground. Yeah, like a banana plantation with a fence around it. But what drove these primates to invade human settlements in the first place? One theory points to deforestation. As villagers cleared the forests, the chimps lost their natural habitat. With less space to live and forage, they started venturing into villages in search of food, especially sugary crops like sugarcane.
Hey Jerry, you smell that? Yeah, smells like sugarcane. Wanna grab some?
Might as well.
I'm tired of berries and existential dread.
But perhaps these encounters aren't mere accidents. Chimps are notoriously territorial and have been living in these forests for centuries. They've got a reputation for being capable of extreme violence, even among their own kind. So maybe they're not just looking for a snack. They could be making a grim statement. They cut down our trees, we take their kids. You sure this isn't overkill? Overkill? Nah, it's called balance. Whatever the cause, life in these villages remains fraught with danger. For the villagers, every day is a tense gamble. For the chimps, perhaps it's a grim assertion of their ancient claim to the land. Think we can negotiate with them? Only if you speak fluent chimp and carry a peace offering of sugarcane. Good luck with that. Number 2. Vengeful Elephant Mum. In 2022, in Raipai village, India's Odisha state, an elderly lady was out doing the most mundane chore imaginable, collecting water. But her peaceful morning took a wild turn when she noticed a herd of elephants approaching. She tried to make a quick exit, but one elephant had other plans. It charged, trampled her, and she tragically died shortly after. I always said elephants have long memories, but this seems personal. Yeah, this wasn't just a bad day. This was a grudge. But here's where the story goes from tragic to downright bizarre. Later that day, as the villagers gathered for her funeral, guess who crashed the ceremony? That's right, the same herd of elephants. And they weren't there to pay their respects. One elephant, likely the same one that had earlier trampled her, stormed straight for the woman's body, picked it up, and flung it into the air like it was performing a halftime show. Meanwhile, the rest of the herd went to work demolishing her home, leaving the rest of the village untouched. Is it just me, or is this the most targeted elephant attack ever? I'm just glad my house isn't on their list. Yet. Once their mission of destruction was complete, the elephants calmly returned to the forest, leaving the rest of the villagers to clean up and ponder the event. No one knows for sure why these elephants singled out this one woman. Some speculated she may have been involved in poaching, perhaps part of a group that killed the elephant's baby. If true, that would explain a lot. After all, elephants are known for their incredible memory and emotional depth.
Remember her? She's the one.
Oh, we're not just walking away from this.
Rally the squad. It's go time.
If this was indeed about revenge, it's safe to say this elephant mom didn't just hold a grudge. She delivered it with interest. And she brought the whole herd along for moral support. Premeditated revenge? Absolutely. Number 1. The Champawat Tiger. Taking the top spot in the Hall of Fame for nightmare animals is the Champawat tiger, affectionately known as the Devil of India. This Bengal tigress didn't just dabble in man-eating. Oh no, she made it a career. Over a 7-year reign of terror in the early 20th century, she claimed the dubious honor of being the most prolific man-eater in history, with a staggering 436 victims. Her career began in Nepal, where she racked up around 200 kills in just 3 years. Naturally, the Nepali army was called in to deal with her. So, how do you catch a tiger that eats people for fun? Simple. You don't. You scare it into someone else's country. And that's exactly what happened. Unable to capture or kill her, the army managed to spook her across the border into India. Unfortunately for the people in Champawat, she brought her appetite with her. For the next 4 years, the tigress casually terrorized local villages, hunting in broad daylight as if she were grocery shopping. She didn't stay in one place for long either. Instead, she would move from village to village like some sort of striped phantom. Where was she last seen? 3 villages over. Great, we're safe. Or are we? She's fast. You know what? I'll just sleep in a tree tonight. Eventually, a hefty reward was offered for her demise, attracting hunters from far and wide. Among them was a young Jim Corbett, a man who would soon become legendary. Corbett wasn't just in it for the prize money. He was determined to end the tiger's reign of terror. All right, kitty, it's you or me. And spoiler alert, it's not gonna be me. Corbett spent months tracking the elusive tigress, following reports, setting traps, and enduring plenty of false alarms. Finally, his break came when she killed a 16-year-old girl, leaving behind a gruesome trail of blood. Corbett followed it, cornering her deep in the forest. When she charged at him, Corbett kept his cool and fired a decisive shot, bringing her 7-year spree to an end. Guess who's top predator now? When Corbett examined the tiger's body, he found her to be in surprisingly good health, aside from one critical detail. Her top and bottom canines on one side were shattered, likely from a hunter's bullet years earlier. Unable to hunt her usual prey, she had turned to easier targets: humans. So, not only was she terrifying, but she was also a bit of a dental disaster. Poor thing. Probably just needed a tiger-sized root canal. Yeah, that's nice, but maybe she could have skipped the human-eating phase? Corbett went on to become one of the most famous hunters of his time, often called in to take down other man-eaters. But he never forgot the Champawat tiger, the one that turned hunting humans into an art form.